Imagine this scene. A hunter crouches beside fresh mammoth tracks in the mud. He is weak, slow, and armed with only a pointy stick. Against a 6-ton giant with tusks longer than his body, he should be dead within seconds. But the deadliest weapon isn't the spear in his hands. It's the invisible force no other creature possessed. The power to think beyond the present moment. While every other apex predator reacts only to what it sees right now, this human is doing something extraordinary. He's predicting what hasn't happened yet. He's seeing 3 days into the future, mapping where this 6-ton giant will be when the moon changes. This cognitive revolution didn't just give us an edge in the hunt. It turned the weakest apes on the planet into the most dangerous predators Earth has ever known. And it didn't stop with hunting. This invisible advantage reshaped entire continents, erased species that had survived for millions of years, and fundamentally altered the planet itself. The human brain developed something unprecedented in the natural world: mental time travel, the ability to project consciousness across temporal boundaries, to experience future events as vividly as memories. Archaeological evidence from Schöningen, Germany, reveals just how sophisticated this capability became 300,000 years ago. Those wooden spears weren't just tools. They were proof of planning that spanned months. Each spear required selecting the right spruce tree, understanding wood grain, and crafting weapons with aerodynamic properties that modern athletes still admire. But here's what sets humans apart from Neanderthals. While Neanderthals had large brains and made tools, they lacked something crucial. Archaeological evidence shows they rarely preserved objects across generations or created convincing grave goods. They couldn't fully imagine their personal past and future the way we could. This cognitive gap severely limited their long-range planning. The human advantage went deeper than just thinking ahead. We developed pattern recognition abilities that bordered on supernatural. A skilled tracker could reconstruct an entire story from broken twigs and disturbed soil. This wasn't simple observation. It was a complex form of inferential logic called recollection. Think about what this means. You're looking at a bent branch, some scattered leaves, a depression in the earth. Your brain is running backwards through time, reconstructing exactly what happened hours ago. The animal's speed, its intent, where it was heading. You're essentially manipulating time itself. This tracking ability, combined with mental time travel, created something devastating. Hunters could predict not just where an animal had been, but where it would be. They could map seasonal migrations, identify ambush points, and position themselves days in advance of their prey's arrival. Archaeological sites across Paleolithic Europe show repeated use of strategic landscape features: water crossings, where animals became vulnerable, natural funnels where entire herds could be trapped. These weren't random discoveries. They were systematically exploited across generations. The neurological hardware that made this possible centered on enlarged parietal cortexes. The same brain region that calculated spear trajectories also translated complex mental images into coordinated action. This is why humans could create representational art, while Neanderthals, despite their intelligence, couldn't. The cognitive machinery was fundamentally different. What emerged was a species that could treat the entire landscape as a predictable resource grid. Hunters didn't just react to opportunities, they created them. They could anticipate where migrating herds would be vulnerable weeks before they arrived. They could plan coordinated attacks that required precise timing across multiple hunting parties. This wasn't just hunting. It was strategic warfare against the natural world. Individual foresight was revolutionary, but it was abstract language that turned human prediction into a species-level superweapon. While other animals communicated about immediate threats or opportunities, humans developed something unprecedented: displaced communication, the ability to coordinate complex strategies about events beyond anyone's immediate perception. This wasn't just advanced signaling. This was the bridge between individual minds that allowed dozens of hunters to hold specialized roles in coordinated attacks across vast distances. Abstract language enabled what researchers call distributed computation, multiple brains working as a single strategic unit. The archaeological evidence for this coordination is staggering. At Dolní Věstonice in the Czech Republic, 30,000 years ago, mammoth hunters weren't just successful, they were systematically devastating. The bone assemblages reveal organizational complexity that required verbal coordination on an unprecedented scale. These settlements contain evidence of bone pipes, likely used for signaling during mass drive hunts. Think about what this means. Hunters positioned across miles of terrain, coordinating the movement of multi-ton animals through precise timing and communication. The chaos of a mammoth drive hunt required real-time adaptation to contingencies, managed through language, sophisticated enough to handle if-then scenarios and role assignments. The scale becomes clear when you examine the logistics. A single mammoth hunt at Dolní Věstonice could yield several tons of meat, requiring immediate processing before spoilage. The coordination needed to butcher, preserve, and distribute these resources demanded groups of 50 to 100 people working in synchronized teams. Without abstract language, this level of organization would be impossible. But the most quantifiable proof comes from the Olsen-Chubbuck bison kill site in Colorado. 8,000 years ago, hunters successfully drove nearly 200 bison into a natural arroyo where escape was impossible. The bone bed stretches 200 feet long and contains an estimated 60,000 pounds of meat. This wasn't just hunting. This was military-level logistics, coordinated through language systems that could manage specialized roles across dozens of individuals. The development of what archaeologists call Paleolithic logistics represents perhaps the most sophisticated pre-agricultural organizational achievement. Strategic planning for mobility, resource caching, and transport across vast territorial ranges. Evidence from the southeastern Alps shows bulk transportation of lithic raw materials over hundreds of kilometers, with planned management of supply chains that anticipated future tool needs far from sources. This required abstract communication about resources that didn't yet exist, in locations that weren't currently occupied, for needs that wouldn't arise for months. The cognitive and linguistic demands were extraordinary. Game theoretic analysis reveals why language was essential for dangerous activities like hunting megafauna. Without the ability to communicate specific role assignments and coordinate contingency plans, groups couldn't maintain the complex cooperation required. The threat of social punishment for individuals who failed their roles could motivate cooperation, but only if everyone shared clear understanding of expectations. Archaeological evidence suggests successful hunting groups developed sophisticated leadership systems. The elaborate burial practices and ritual activities at sites like Dolní Věstonice indicate social organization that could manage group dynamics among large hunting parties. Specialized roles emerged. Individuals with expertise in animal behavior, tracking, weapon production, and meat processing. The coordination enabled by abstract language created feedback loops. Successful hunts required larger groups. Larger groups required more sophisticated coordination. More sophisticated coordination enabled even more ambitious hunting operations. The linguistic capabilities that allowed humans to plan mammoth ambushes became the foundation for managing increasingly complex social systems. This wasn't just communication, it was the technology that allowed human intelligence to scale exponentially. Individual prediction became collective strategy. Personal foresight became species-wide planning. The invisible weapon that started with mental time travel was now amplified through networks of coordinated minds, all focused on a single objective, turning the natural world into a predictable, exploitable resource system. The consequences would reshape continents. But even the most sophisticated language has limits. Human memory is fallible. Strategic knowledge dies with individuals. The cognitive revolution required one more breakthrough: the ability to store complex information outside the human brain itself. Around 25,000 years ago, at Ishango in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, someone carved 168 precise notches into a bone tool. This wasn't random mark-making. The patterns suggest deliberate mathematical thinking. Some researchers believe it functioned as a lunar calendar, tracking 6-month cycles with remarkable accuracy. Think about what this represents. For the first time in Earth's history, a species was offloading cognitive work to external objects. The complex variables required for coordinated predictive planning, lunar phases, seasonal shifts, animal migration patterns, resource availability, exceeded individual working memory. But notation systems converted this temporal data into stable, objective formats that entire groups could access. The ability to externally record cyclical data meant hunting groups could predict optimal times for major operations and coordinate activities with predictable environmental changes. This external memory capability provided advantages no other species could match. But the real revolution came with cave art. The sophisticated paintings at Lascaux and Chauvet weren't just artistic expression, they were instructional archives. detailed repositories of hunting knowledge that could be transmitted across generations. The panel of horses at Chauvet features 19 different animal species, rendered with techniques that demonstrate advanced understanding of anatomy, perspective, and movement. The artistic sophistication suggests these weren't decorations, they were teaching tools, external storage systems for critical survival knowledge. Look closer at the Hall of Bulls at Lascaux. Archaeological analysis reveals this space could accommodate large groups, with complex images visible from distance. The dynamic representations show animals in motion, many appearing to charge toward each other. Cave art sites across Europe show consistent patterns that emphasize characteristics most relevant to hunting success. Anatomical details highlighting vulnerable points for spear placement. Behavioral representations informing strategy development. The concentration of cave art in regions with abundant megafauna and the timing during periods of intensive hunting suggests direct connections between these external memory systems and hunting effectiveness. The feedback loop this created was unprecedented. External memory systems enabled more sophisticated planning. More sophisticated planning led to hunting innovations. This process enabled cultural evolution to outpace biological evolution entirely. Technological and strategic innovations could be preserved, modified, and transmitted with increasing fidelity and complexity. Human populations developed hunting capabilities that far exceeded what any individual could achieve within a single lifetime. The evolution of storytelling represents another crucial component. Stories filled with symbolism allowed populations to share strategic information about hunting, environmental conditions, and resource availability across extended social networks. The ability to communicate about entirely fictional scenarios provided unprecedented capabilities for exploring potential future situations and developing contingency plans. Archaeological evidence shows this knowledge transmission system coincided with rapid improvements in hunting success and technological innovation. The appearance of increasingly sophisticated tool traditions, specialized hunting equipment, and expansion into new environments all correlate with enhanced symbolic and communication capabilities. The emergence of these external memory systems created something revolutionary: inherited intelligence. Each generation didn't start from zero. They inherited the accumulated, validated, predictive knowledge of their ancestors. The strategic insights that took lifetimes to develop could be transmitted instantly to the next generation through symbols, stories, and preserved instructions. This cumulative advantage accelerated human cognitive evolution beyond anything seen in nature. While other species remained limited by individual learning and genetic inheritance, humans created cultural inheritance systems that could preserve and build upon strategic knowledge indefinitely. Individual prediction became collective strategy. Personal foresight became inherited wisdom. The invisible weapon that started with the ability to think ahead had evolved into a species-wide information processing system. The consequences would be devastating for every other large animal on Earth. The archaeological evidence for what happened next reads like a crime scene investigation spanning continents. Paul Martin's overkill hypothesis, developed in the 1960s, proposed something shocking. Human hunting was the primary cause of megafauna extinctions during the Pleistocene period. Recent radiocarbon dating has vindicated Martin's predictions with devastating precision. In eastern Beringia, the contiguous United States, and South America, megafaunal population declines show north to south time-transgressive patterns that mirror human migration. The statistical correlations are undeniable. Human arrival times directly predict the initiation of species population declines across multiple continents. In North America, approximately 70% of megafauna genera weighing over 44 kilograms became extinct during the late Pleistocene. South America lost 80% of its megafauna genera. Australia saw most large animal species disappear within several thousand years of human arrival. But it's the selectivity that proves human causation. These extinctions primarily affected large-bodied species that would have been preferred targets for human hunters, while smaller species remained largely unaffected. This size-selective pattern matches predictions based on optimal foraging theory and human hunting preferences, but it's impossible to explain through climate change or disease, which would affect species randomly across size categories. In North America, extinctions occurred first in Alaska and western regions, then progressed eastward and southward. South America shows similar wave-like patterns, with extinctions beginning in northern regions and advancing toward the southern cone. The speed of these extinction events represents perhaps the most compelling evidence. Many species disappeared within centuries or millennia of initial human contact, rather than gradually declining over longer periods, as environmental change would predict. The rapid pace indicates human hunting pressure was sufficiently intense to overwhelm reproductive capacity, leading to population crashes even among previously abundant species. The ecological consequences fundamentally altered ecosystem structure across continents. The loss of large herbivores eliminated key ecosystem engineers that had maintained open grassland environments through grazing pressure. Vegetation structure changed. Fire regimes shifted. Entire landscapes transformed. The disappearance of apex predators like saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, and giant bears eliminated the regulatory mechanisms that had maintained ecological balance. Some prey species increased in abundance, while others faced reduced competition, creating complex ecological reorganizations that took millennia to stabilize. Archaeological evidence shows human populations were aware of and responsive to these ecological changes. More diverse toolkits appeared following major extinction events. Increased reliance on plant resources emerged. Technological innovations for processing smaller prey developed. These represent adaptations to changing resource availability following megafauna extinction. The long-term environmental consequences include permanent changes in soil nutrient cycling, vegetation composition, fire regimes, and landscape structure that continue influencing modern ecosystems. The absence of large herbivores allowed forest expansion in regions previously maintained as grasslands, fundamentally altering regional climate patterns and biodiversity. The invisible weapon that turned weak apes into apex predators didn't just change hunting, it changed everything. The same cognitive revolution that enabled our ancestors to predict mammoth movements and coordinate complex hunts gave us the power to reshape entire continents. Mental time travel, abstract language, and external memory created feedback loops that accelerated human capabilities beyond anything nature had ever produced. We didn't just adapt to environments, we learned to predict them, manipulate them, and ultimately control them. But the archaeological record reveals a sobering truth. The same predictive intelligence that conquered giants also bears responsibility for what we lost. The cognitive tools that made us masters of the Pleistocene continue driving environmental transformation today. The question isn't whether we can predict the future. Our ancestors proved that 300,000 years ago. The question is what we'll choose to do with that prediction. The invisible weapon that eliminated mammoths now faces challenges that require the same coordinated planning that once brought down giants. If this journey into the cognitive revolution that shaped our species left you questioning everything we thought we knew about human intelligence, don't let it end here. Subscribe to see what other uncomfortable truths are buried in our evolutionary past.